And we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for being here. This is Mr. Matt Meador. He is a student in our IDT program here in the ICL department, and we are excited to have him to share his expertise with us. And I'm going to go ahead and let him start. Thank you for being here this afternoon, Matt.
No, thank you. Again, this is University of Memphis as an anchor. I completed a PhD or EDD there in 2021. Hard to believe it's been 5 years already. So on the screen, as you can see, clearly been hard at work with some very interesting things, largely interesting things. I'll just leave it at that. So today's topic is, of course, basically trying to go over AI resiliency and what that looks like. AI is everywhere. You go out there on LinkedIn, you're going to see it. You go into, your Sage publications, things of that nature. You're going to see a large amount of text on artificial intelligence. There's so much information that's evolving around artificial intelligence that it becomes frustrating because, again, there's no real playbook that's out there. And of course, I've got college students. I'm a history professor for the University of Tennessee at Martin. And so my students have questions. Causation for me to kind of get into this particular point was to see the need, but two, grasping with the notion that this isn't going anywhere. It's already here. Our students are using it. I'm using it. And that leads to more questions. Well, if my students are using it, how are they using it? If I'm going to use it, how am I going to use it? And of course, with no playbook, no policy, no procedure in place, obviously that leads to, well, what's next? One question led to another question and another question after that. With no real guidance, that's a risk, a significant risk. As you all know, you're all educators in higher education, so on and so forth. And so the whole purpose of this was to bridge that risk and learn a little something in the process. And that process, I'm going to get to it in a moment. It's called LAIR. All right. So if you're active on LinkedIn, you're going to see that those conversations come to fruition. You're going to see various conversations from, very traditional schools. Formal schools of thought are already out there and they've already formed. The majority of the stuff that we're actually seeing at this point in time is based on tools. And that in and of itself is also a risk because where we're going to, and as we get into the crux of the actual presentation, it's not about the tool. It's about our customer, your customer, my customer, and that's our student. It's about our process. It's about the learning in general and what is learning going to look like. And because you've chosen to be here today, you're now in a situation where you're owning a new education, where we're taking the ways of our old systems and we're blending those with the ways of the new. And we have a real opportunity to do this. And that's why I'm so very, very thankful that we're here today. So sit back and we're going to take some questions just to kind of go over some high level stuff. We will have a 10-minute break right at the top of the hour. After that, we're going to have demo time. You're going to see live data, raw data. Of course, it's been sanitized because I've got 8th graders at a middle school that I'm piloting currently. And I've also got, a fully integrated undergrad class that I'm using GPT in for historical analysis. And I've also got a dual enrollment class. So you're going to get a host of information to include real world challenges that I'm facing. And of course, you're more than likely facing yourself. So without further ado, we're going to get beyond this. Is there any question? Is that a question? Outstanding. All right. So guess what, folks? You already know it. AI is already here. It's not going anywhere. It's in our classroom. It's in our tools. You have, it's in our mobile phones. It's on our computers. You get on, you Google something, and of course, the text is now outfit with trying to predict what it is you're actually going to type, and it's trying to complete it for you. It's there. Again, our shift in focus has actually got to be at this point how we protect that learning process. So if you look over here on the screen, we've got the reality aspect of it. Just follow along. We already know this. Students are using it. We're using it. We might be in various degrees of advancement on how we're using it, but nonetheless, it's not something that we're prepping for. Okay, it's definitely something that is. I mean, you just
I
gotta
hope you have a
you just
happy
gotta roll with it,
birthday.
right?
Make good choices.
Yeah. Let me pull this back up. We've got some folks that are off of mute. If you don't mind muting yourself, that would be amazing. So, as far as the students, our students aren't waiting for any kind of policy. They're not waiting for any kind of directive from our department leads, or they're not waiting on an institution to adopt some formal, segue or something formal in reference to that. They're not waiting on it. They're already using it, which is also a significant risk in and of itself, because you're good, Amanda. It's a significant risk in and of itself. It's because there's nothing formal. There's no guardrails, and we all have sensed something, or we might have heard, well, this output can be wrong, or something here can be wrong. I don't know about you, but that's a significant risk for me, because I would certainly want, my students to have the appropriate guardrails, particularly around our research cycles. So that's a significant thing. The next thing is obviously, pressure. Timing is of the essence. Conversations around artificial intelligence are only speeding up. They're only getting heavier. You might be asked, from a department level staff, you might be asked what you're doing. How are you responding? Of course, answers might necessarily and clearly often be without any guidance. So how are you doing it? Right? When we lead and we start to answer these things, you look at this misconception. And when I mean addressing the misconception, we're asking, what's happening? Or so what happens? We're defaulting to the wrong problem. How are you using ChatGPT? How are you using Google Gemini? How are your students using this? How are you using Grok, Claude? We're defaulting, again, to the wrong problem. It's not the tool. It is absolutely 100% the process. When we focus on the tool, we're starting to really focus on the access, detection, and of course, restriction. I do a litmus test when I go out and I offer up pilots. I offer a pilot called AI Learning for Students. It's geared towards K-12. And I have these conversations, and what I'm seeing right now is when you have a school district or a staff that doesn't quite understand artificial intelligence, the first thing is they block it off of their systems. Can't use ChatGPT, can't use this, can't use that. Oh, students are cheating. You're going to have that. It's going to happen. But still, that doesn't negate the fact that you've got to have a process in place. You haven't built a layer. You've got to build that layer, right? So that's the whole reframing aspect of things. Again, access, detection, restriction. Part of the problem, but not the core issue. So, if we're going to reframe this, the real challenge, again, is not how do we control AI, but how do you protect that learning process? That's your true mandate. That's my true mandate. This is my profession. And I'm going to protect it. Because my customer, the world's their oyster, right? This is about them. So that's the true mandate. The challenge is using AI in ways that actually protect learning. It protects the rigor. And of course, last but not least, that integrity. Now, I know when I went through and I studied under Dr. Rockison Zapque and Dr. Tofik and Dr. Shepard. I don't know if you guys are on. I think Amanda's on the call, but that was all the whole purpose of all of this. That process, that learning process, getting through our introduction, chapter 1, and off to chapter 5. Same thing here. The only thing is, folks, is everything is sped up. There's a lot of, how do I do this? What do I do? And so again, that true mandate isn't so much, hey, how are you using ChatGPT or Claude or whatever other tool? The learning process is completely agnostic to any tool. But everything that we've come across so far has been led with the tool first. I don't know about you, but when you build a house, you want a strong foundation, and we're getting back to that, which is why we're having this conversation right now. Getting back to the foundation. It's the learning process, and how do we do it? We'll get to that in a moment. Protecting learning, preserving rigor, and maintaining integrity. What I did while studying all this, identifying and talking about a structure, what is that structure going to look like? Because I've seen this play out firsthand with students from 8th grade through undergraduate levels. We can't just tell the students don't use AI. We can't continue to go down a path of, oh, we don't understand it, we'll just prevent it from happening. Kids are going to use it, teachers are going to use it, educators, instructors, however you want to call it, tomatoes. It's going to happen. The real piece and the magic behind this is to show them how to use it without losing the thinking. And that's precisely where the LAIR came in. And it's a LAIR framework. LAIR is spelled L-A-I-R. And it means literacy, application, interpretation, and responsibility. So all that to say this, the closing line on this particular slide, it's not about the tools. It's about making sure that learning actually still happens, even when AI is in the room. And I think that's where a lot of air and opportunity will lend itself to how we operate as educators in this profession. Again, grad students, undergrad students, K-12, so on and so forth. Now, there are some tensions behind this AI-enabled learning. A lot of tension. If you look at this, unfortunately, my slide deck over here does not go back and forth. I wish it was interactive in that regard. But for all intents and purposes, we'll use left side, right side. Key question here is what belongs to the student and what belongs to the tool. AI in education is not a yes or no decision, believe it or not. It's just not. It truly is a series of trade-offs. Think about that, a series of trade-offs. I never thought about it until physically getting in here and working with a couple of things. I'll give you an example as far as a trade-off. Told you I'm a history professor. I just by happenstance started to study this and started to piece stuff together. One of the very first things, or very first trade-off segments that I had, was knowing that my students were going to use a GPT. I don't know who designed the GPT. The information can summarize, it can analyze a little bit, but is it the full spectrum of a summary or an analysis or a critical thought, cognition? Does it hit all the points of history? And so what I did was I designed a GPT that in order to pass or to order successfully navigate through a history course, these were the elements, the tenets, the attributes that you would have to navigate it as an undergrad. I haven't gotten into haven't gotten to our dual enrollment aspect of things just yet. That's coming in this lesson when I show you some raw data. So as I started to form this, the trade-off was, okay, well, I know that they're going to use it. How can I support them? Well, I have an open educational resource, and I can train it on an open educational resource. That eliminates the need for them having to determine whether they need to buy a $75 textbook. It's 100% open, and it's trained on that. So they can now use this as an assistant to say, hey, I'd like to, summarize chapter 1. In addition to summarizing chapter 1, I'd like to enhance, through a cause and effect analysis of the space race, beginning with John F. Kennedy's Rice speech in 1962. I'm not going to go too down far rabbit holes with history. I know that would probably bore you. But these are real life situations, these trade-offs that as an instructor, a professor, a teacher, I'm having to deal with and grapple with as we're starting to say, hey, AI is here. Your kids are using it. How are they using it? And all of these things are really, really bombarding me. Again, folks, I'm just as passionate about this as you are. This is my profession, right? So left side, right side. Students fall into those categories. They can go in and they can prompt something just so they can cut, copy, and paste it to avoid the work. Or we can blend our assignments and we can enhance that work and create a supportive network. You're going to see a variation of all of these left side and right side with live data here in just a little bit. Efficiency, speeding up the output. I have students, even as of 11 o'clock this morning, that have come in and said, oh, I didn't have time to read something, so I just put it in here. Just simply speeding up the output. No real true attestment to whether or not they understood or could grapple with the defending, if you will, whether or not they understood what it was they were reading. Where we're at now with this AI-enabled learning, go to the right side, is the avoidance aspect of things. Don't want them to skip through the thinking process. Again, we've got to protect that learning process. Everything else around us is going to move at lightning speed, and that's clearly happening right now. But as long as we've identified and we're protecting that thinking process, that's where your LAIR is built. And of course, this outsourcing of cognition, you're going to see in data today through what we call weak output, what we call middle output, and what we call strong output. Very simple: weak, middle, and strong. You're going to see the advancement, or just see where the thought process is in individual students across different levels. And of course, that last piece is the strengthening the learning, the iterative co-thinking. You're going to see some output here in a moment where it might actually pass. And you might ask yourself, you might, as a professor or a teacher, you might ask yourself, hey, what is it? Is this a passable assignment, activity? Some of it looks pretty reasonable, but that's for the demo. Get ready for that. It's really, really neat stuff. Used as a iterative co-thinking partner, it can actually strengthen learning. And that's why we have an opportunity to actually liberate how we learn. Again, we can't, with the speed in which this is moving, it's not something that we can just simply take an old system and say, oh, It's exposing gaps. And our methods are what's going to be the seal in the gaps that have been exposed. So the question is not should students use AI, or whether I should use AI as a teacher. The question now is what belongs to the student. That main question down there at the bottom. What belongs to the student? And what belongs to the tool? So you have left column, right column. Now, very quickly, I want to share something with you guys, if you guys do not mind. I have something for you. Where did it go? All right. All right. If you guys could do me the honor of just indulging me here, I'd like to get a little data. Fair enough. Yep. We'll take another 15 seconds and then we'll close this down. It looks like about everybody has done it. Yeah, a lot of active integration. Wonderful. Exploring but unsure how to use it. Understood. Absolutely understood and concerned about misuse. Right there with you. Okay. All right. And we'll go ahead and close that down. Thank you all. And I'll get back over to this. All right, let me get my presentation back up. I apologize. There we go. All right. Oh, I'm sorry. Did we have a question in the chat? Sorry, guys. I'm going through a couple of screens over here.
No, it wasn't a question. It was just kind of an addition to the poll. That
Okay.
It was two of the things.
Let's see. I'm not able to have my sound on the phone. Okay, that's fine. Sorry about that. I see. I wouldn't say. Yes, active integration, also controlled about misuse. Okay. All right. And fair enough. And we're going to talk about that here in a moment because, again, we're talking about AR responsibility, right? And you're going to see a couple of things. Again, we wouldn't be having these course offerings, okay? Wouldn't have these types of conversations if, in fact, it wasn't an applied feature. I can definitely tell you that as a professor, I've had to adopt a couple of things from my end to bridge some of those areas. But we're going to get to that, no doubt. I want to make sure that we leave enough time for you guys to see physical demos and walk through some of these things, and along with the lab data. All right. So, responsible AI, active human governance. This is it. Here's where things are really going to become really interesting. Active human governance. What does that mean? Anybody have any ideas? What is active human governance? Any thoughts?
Overseeing.
Okay, overseeing guardrails, right?
Someone in the chat said critically examining the product.
There you go. There you go. And what does that critical examination look like? Is it confidence? Think about it. When you prompt something, it's going to give you a confident prediction. Guys, that's all this stuff is. Particularly Gen AI, it's a huge predictor. It is exactly what it is. It's predicting text. What's that next stream going to be? That's exactly what it is. It's a huge predictor. That being said, it's not always truthful. It doesn't know it's truthful, but it's not always truthful. And it's going to sound confident. I don't know about you, but I can sound confident, still be dead wrong. That's not to take away from the value that this is, but it's not always the first layer of conversation. Sometimes the information, the richness of where the learning actually occurs is in that second and third and fourth layer on the engagement and how we work at this. Okay? But if we don't actively design how it's used, it's going to default to convenient learning. It's going to default to something. That's where we are the central fixture as educators, as leaders here. We are the central fixture in making sure that it doesn't get to that point. All right. So looking at the responsible AI, that's the center point here, our center of gravity. That's what we're really talking about today, is responsible AI. You know, we just saw in the poll just a little bit ago that there was still some concern about misuse. That's a very valid notion. Just saw in the news a couple of days ago that, you know, Grok is the Grok is you know, known for you know, creating some pretty risque images, falsification, things that are pretty grotesque. Okay, that's going to happen. But again, responsible use gets back to that active human governance, and we have an opportunity to where we can build that through our learning process. Responsible AI use in the classroom itself is not banning it, but it's also not blindly accepting it. You're going to see a response from a student that just came into, one of my students just came in today. I made sure that I screenshotted it because I wanted you to see it. But even that one student acknowledged that, you know, sometimes that, you know, she really learned through the process, but other times she just accepted it at face value for what it was. Lets me know that I've got to go a little further in trying to understand where they're coming from. All right. It's designed to assist and not replace. That's one of the key things here. It should absolutely not replace, you know, thinking by any stretch of the imagination. It can support drafting. It can brainstorm, help support brainstorming. It can help explore ideas. But it can't be the cognitive work that goes into it. Relying on it for the cognitive load, if you will, that really is a landmine. Because if AI is doing the thinking, well, then the student's not doing that. And of course, that's our landmine. That's something that I face even as a professor as well. The process, though, if you look at our process protection, we're actually going a little backwards here. We can put up the guardrails and we can actually protect that process, not just the product. Think about that term. We can protect the process and not just the product. We don't have to grade only for final outputs. You're going to see this here in a moment. You're going to see bad output. You're going to see middle output. And you're going to see strong output. It's the nature of the beast. It's going to happen. We can connect that back that this is what we just saw with the visible thinking. Okay? If you think of it in that regard, visible thinking. One of the interesting things that I have come across as a lived experience teaching is that a student, when I first rolled out a full integration of a ChatGPT, a Google Gym, the process was tailored to not the tool itself, but having that learning process put in place. And you know, the first thing out of the students' mouths, it wasn't a question of, hey, Dr. Meador, this is really interesting, or hey, you know, what about this, or what about that? It was, what do I have to do for an A? going to happen. It's going to happen to you if it's not happening already. What do I have to do? What is it that you're looking for? The inspiration that I've drawn off of that is to go back and say, well, what type of conversation have you had with the GPT? Show me the output. Show me the conversation. Show me the questions that you've asked it. Show me where you've taken one leap into a deeper void. Some have actually demonstrated that prowess, and others just simply want to know how to get their A and move on. And that's okay. AI outputs are not automatically correct. We know that. And of course, our evaluation, and here's where that human governance comes in, our evaluation is a must. We've got to be able to evaluate that. AI, in fact, can generate, but it cannot evaluate in the context that we actually can. I'm not a psychologist, so therefore I can't speak to, how you would grade a psychology paper, but I certainly know how we would grade a history paper. And that being said, I know the ins and the outs of particularly the inner workings of how that works, particularly around, academic integrity, rigor, synthesis, all right, what that's going to look like. And of course, those are the pillars, if you will, in which that evaluation has to come from. It's not going to happen from AI. As far as transparency is concerned, students should actually disclose how AI was used. Again, we know that artificial intelligence can summarize something. It can actually create an analysis. We know that AI, if you followed AI for an extended period of time, it'll write your law papers. And that's pretty cool, right? Well, not for one guy who was actually sanctioned. I'm sorry for that. It's a poor attempt at humor there, but one guy used it, and this was a 2024 situation up in the D.C. area that we ran into. Misjudgment turned into a very interesting outcome for that gentleman. But being able to support how they used AI is a big thing. A big thing even in our learning process now. I've even had to adapt to, hey, this is a pretty good discussion comment. I'm glad you chimed in. How'd you use AI? Even reframing how I've questioned things. Well, I went to AI and it cleaned up my grammar. Oh, it cleaned this up, or it took this out. It helped me here, it helped me there. So it's retooling even how I assess them. One of the key plugs for me is that using this particular human governance piece, just what's happening here on the screen with responsible AI, is also a workforce readiness technique. Because even on their jobs, the expectation is to follow the 5 tiers here. At this point, and for those who are still concerned about misuse, I hear you. I truly do. It's not about catching students. We're in a situation now, after 3 years of Gen AI exposure, we're in a situation now where it's about making thinking visible, making thinking deeper and richer. Now, we do that through a framework. LAIR is a framework that I devolved about a year and a half ago. I've used it in several pilots, active engagements with students, gotten drawn on district feedback, student engagement, student feedback. It's rarely been tested. And now in a situation to use it as a filter. LAIR is a practical model for the responsible use. It's specifically built to address negative behaviors that are often associated with AI access, such as using AI to substitute their work. This is that avoiding the work, if you recall the left column. Skipping the thinking process, weakening their learning. LAIR was designed to do that. Literacy, application, interpretation, and responsibility. You're going to see that come to life here in just a moment. Any questions so far? So how to break this down even further, let's talk about literacy. The concept behind literacy alone is it limits tool misuse through the assurance that students actually understand what AI can and cannot do. Seems novel, but interesting in and of itself. That leads to our next layer, which is our application. The prevention of thoughtless reliance. Those students who come in and type in your question, what is Gagne's methods of instructional design, and taking that, because it'll give them that information, but simply taking that and not thinking about it. How do those methods relate to each other? What builds upon the other? How can I apply that? The prevention of the thoughtless reliance. With application, it actually requires that AI is used with explicit intent and is directly tied to course outcomes. When you look at the interpretation is simply just another domain that strengthens academic judgment, because it forces students to critically evaluate, question, and really interrogate AI output. And of course, last is the responsibility. And here's where that human governance comes in. Human governance is a two-way street. It comes from the top, but it also comes up from the bottom. And right there in that center is where once you run through the LAIR framework, you should meet the authentic academic work that we're all looking for. This is what belongs to the student, that responsibility. That question that we had a couple of slides ago, what belongs to the student, what belongs to the tool? That's where the responsibility is. The full ethical and academic accountability for the final result. I ask my students, as an accountability piece, do you take responsibility for the work that you've submitted? I've had to change my methods too. It's not just something that we can throw a handful of paint on the wall and connect the dots. There's structure. All right. Now, we'll get through this slide and then I've got scheduled for a break for us. So I call this the iceberg. I told you a little earlier that we're designing for visible thinking, using AI, the usage of AI, a fully integrated AI in our classrooms has got to be designed for visible thinking, not just final products. Well, you all know, hopefully you all know about the iceberg. What we see on the top is, the prettiest of the iceberg. We don't know, it's just often the smallest piece at the top. Polished final output, whether that's, a summary or generic responses, final drafts, okay? You're going to see it here in a moment that AI can generate this with just minimal prompting. Most people don't see the authentic cognition that goes into this. Explanation of reasoning, the defensibility of choices and conclusions, the reflection on any process, context-specific application. And of course, last but not least, is that comparison and critique. That's where our processes really start to connect those dots, that systems thinking, if you will. And again, it's a very real thing. It's a very lived experience. Even I've and am experiencing this myself. Most of our assignments right now are designed to evaluate what's visible, as you see it on the screen here, our iceberg. That's how we've designed them. But the learning actually happens in what's not visible, that authentic cognition. All right. So I opened up another poll number 2. So we'll take about another 20 seconds or so, and if you don't mind. Very likely, yeah. There are some tips and tricks that already lend itself to instant detection. The delta that's typically in there, the overarching generalization of the terminology that typically goes in there. Knowing your student, as a matter of fact, having graded or looked at some discussions, and knowing, getting a sense of how they write. And then all of a sudden you start to see some, various forms of papers that they're starting to submit. And you start to, question whether or not, the accuracy of them particularly writing it. Those all tools and tricks of the trade. All right, so I will go ahead and close this out in 8 seconds. And there we are. There's our results there. All interesting stuff. Okay, so we got a full range of the spectrum there. Not sure what to look. Okay, and that's, again, no right or wrong answer here. We all may have varying degrees of experience on how to look for AI usage, how even in its detection. I will also tell you this. I hope there's no reps on the call for anybody, but there's not a single detector that's out there that's 100% accurate. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. There's detectors out there that will say, hey, if you use Grammarly, it's going to show up as, AI generated, and it absolutely will. And it's going to happen to all the time. But you know what? I'm going to continue to use Grammarly. I'm not the greatest writer in the world. And so I own that. And so having these tools available to form as an assistant is, always nice. So, you have those tools available, but you also have your editor, right? So that's always a plus. You're a copywriter. I see something from, is it Wessam Salem? I saw the question about critically examining the product. You're going to see that here in just a moment. That's something that you'll see with the critical examination there. All right. Logan, do you have anything to add before I jump back into it?
I don't.
Outstanding. Okay. Let's talk about examination real quick. I'm going to stay on this slide. So we'll pick up back from authentic cognition. Looking at everything that actually lives below the tip of the iceberg, questions like, can the student explain their reasoning? Can they defend their choices? Can they reflect on how they got from point A to point B? Again, how can they apply it to specific context? And of course, can they compare, critique, and even adapt their ideas? That's exactly where LAIR comes in. Remember, literacy is, do they understand what they're working with? What can AI do and what can't AI do? That application tier, domain, dimension, tenant. Are they using it with purpose? That's the application, the interpretation. Can they evaluate it and critique it? And of course, last but not least is that responsibility layer, and that's, can they own it and defend it? Own it and defend it. Sounds like my dissertation defense, right? All right, another poor attempt at humor. So, to kind of calm everybody down, formed this assessment resiliency matrix. This is that left side, right side that I was telling you about. When you do your vulnerable assessment, this is where, a student comes in and can just simply put, type a prompt in and just let it go. All left side, it's going to give you, or it's going to have the rewarding of a summary over an analysis. It's going to ask very generic responses. It's not going to be indicative of any kind of process, no real reflection, okay? And they can actually be completed very, very quickly with any interaction with AI at all. But when you move over to the right side and you practice for resiliency, and you're standing up at that plate and you're trying to hit that grand slam with your student learning process, this is where we're now getting into the demand for reasoning. They want an explanation. You want to know, how did you use this? And why did you use it? Be able to defend your choice. The requirement for, again, context-specific application. Reflection, especially on iterative processes. Demands for comparison and critiques. Human judgment, verifiable reasoning are mandatory. All that is that right side column. And we're going to go back to it. Like I said, you're going to see left side, you're going to see right side here in a moment. But this is the most practical way of addressing vulnerability and resiliency. And I think that's the difference between the assignments. You have those that are vulnerable, and I'm actually measuring by looking at the output as I look through all 352 students' papers this semester across 5 classes. I'm looking at all that output. Each textbook is 15 chapters apiece. Each and every one of them have a ChatGPT assignment. I'm looking at all that data. Looking at all of it, and my brain is just absolute mush. So the only sanity that I had was to be able to go through the output and say, okay, which one's vulnerable and which one's resilient? Because we're measuring for historical analysis here. Again, I'm a history professor. You're going to see some of that here in just a moment. Hold that thought. Let me do this. I want to share something with you. That way it puts things into context. Stand by one moment. I have a series of images that I would like for you to take a look at. All right. This is a real response from a real history course from History 201. History 201 is the first survey course running from up until 1877, Reconstruction. What you see here is an assignment that was given to all of my students across every class from History 201 to History 202. This was to gauge interaction, and this was to gauge not just student agency, but looking at and identifying weak, middle, and good output. So just as you look through this, can everybody see the image, by the way? The student's giving me the GPT response. They're giving me their response. What if I told you that what's on here is actually a weak response? The weakness lies in the fact that it's just a summary. There's nothing that's really hooking me in other than, okay, you've got a GPT response, and of course you've got your response. What if I told you a stronger response would look like this? Is everybody reading this, by the way? Can I move forward?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
What if I told you that a stronger response would start to look like this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we're getting into
I'm getting detailed.
the nitty-gritty stuff now. So we're getting more succinct with our process. They've even created a cause and effect map. Again, the visual thinking is starting to form, but the substance is still middle ground territory. Notice here they even have a reflection. Now, the work in progress, or the solid output, is actually this. Very detailed, still a work in progress. And this is where the teacher comes in. We've gotten things broken down. They've even got our active text that's associated with it. But still, this being that product, here's where I go in and can critically engage with the product itself. First and foremost, they only make reference of chapter 1, so they're only using one source. So now my assessment was to say, or is to say, are there any primary sources that you could have used? If so, how? And where would you have inserted them? So the whole process now really starts to become formatted on the literacy, application, interpretation, and of course that responsibility piece, right? All these, like I said, I had to sanitize these because it's just coming from a live class, but the students are even using AI to create their output there in a demonstration to just visually show their visual thinking process. Again, not perfect. This is actually a good output. Not great, but good. This individual actually cleaned this up and made this their own. They owned it and they defended it. They also have 4 more pages of information of everything that I asked for. Now, let me show you this. In my course shell, everything that is rubric based, obviously. All right. But this is what I'm looking for when I'm looking at their output. Obviously, they have access to this. And I'll show you the other one where we start to physically move in and I'm grading them and do grade them on GPT engagement. Now, what you just saw was those were dual enrollment students, still in that bubble of working in their high school existence, but also attempting to meet the expectations of college demand. Again, this isn't to focus on, what student's better than the other, but I also want to demonstrate the undergrad side. So that weak output, that left column, this is from a traditional undergrad. Summary, nothing detailed. Again, I teach both 201 as well as 202. And that being said, this is post, this class right here is post 1877 or post Reconstruction into contemporary history. And so you guys can clearly see the output that's there. And that critical assessment of the product is not just coming from me. I ask those questions of the student themselves as well. Hey, what are you doing here? What's going on? What can change? How can it benefit you? How do you defend? How can you defend this? What sources did you use? Did you use primary sources? Those key questions that come in to really enhance that learning process. All right. So I think you guys got that. All right. So I've got to minimize all of this. Sorry, folks. All right. Same thing. Anatomy of an output. What you just saw, again, live information there. Weak use is AI usage as a substitute. We can go in right now and write a lesson plan for 4th grade fractions. If I was a teacher, if I was a student, I could go in and say, tell me about slope. What is slope? Again, subject, context specific, completely transferable across any subject area that we've got there. Looking at it through the lens of LAIR, okay? Literacy, application, interpretation, and responsibility. The structure now changes. You've gone from left column to right column. You see visibility in the input, which is the prompt. And the student now shifts and acts as the final editor. And so as you saw in the images before between, the dual enrollment and the undergrad, that visual thinking now puts me into a situation to where my judgment is preserved and I can solely focus on the rubric. All right. If you guys don't mind, I've got another one. right. Why is... Can you guys see the poll? My goodness. Okay, so let's do this. I apologize about that. That's what it was. Okay, fixed it. There we go. I guess I'm still sharing. I apologize. Yeah, lots of critical thinking. Yeah. Clear guidelines. All right, we'll take about 30 more seconds. Give everybody an opportunity to who would like to respond. Laura, yes. Concern around students who do not want to use for ethical reasons. Completely understood. I've also come across students who, as a matter of fact, there we go. We'll go ahead and end that, and we can share that. I've come across students who do not want to use artificial intelligence, and of course, you've got to work that judgment call. All right, that's just one of those things. With this being as new as it is, the rigidity, I think, for me, I know for a fact that coming in entirely too rigid and just saying, hey, it's out there, you're going to do it anyway, I don't think that's the proper approach. But you know your students, and it's a case by case situation. And of course, there are no guidelines for that at all. You've got some that are going to use it, you've got some that aren't. The whole purpose and intent behind all of this is putting a framework in place for those that are using it. It's done that learning process is protected. I hope that helps you out just slightly. There's a lot of room to grow. Okay. All right. So let's jump into this. All right. So I've shared that. All right. So let's talk about the faculty diagnostic real quick. And of course, I have one pagers, and one pagers are Logan. I don't know if you can see it with the attachment that or the invite, but I have sent a series of, or attached this morning, a series of documents. So the diagnostic, both the faculty as well as the student diagnostic, you're going to see the LAIR framework written out, and of course, you can share that with your folks there, and they'll have access to that. To include some other information in case you want to stay connected, whatever, what have you. I'm right here in the Memphis area, so there's always that opportunity there. But looking at this, the faculty diagnostics is pretty hopefully self-explanatory. But it's a simple way to decide when AI actually belongs in an assignment and when it doesn't. So Laura, to kind of go back for students who don't want to use it, or a student who does want to use it, this kind of helps out on when, again, belonging as far as assignment and when it is needed, and of course when it's not. But just looking at the top, every decision is going to start from there. What's the learning goal? What's the outcome? What's the purpose of the assignment, if you will? When you move a little further down, does AI use support the core learning goal? Okay. Yes. Continue. If not, then obviously, restrict the use. Does the planned AI use preserve student thinking rather than substituting it? Yes, you can continue further down. If not, obviously redesign, and of course, distinguish support from substitution in case you run into situations like that. All cases that I've had to use myself in my classes. each and every one, even to this day. When it comes to full integration, these questions come up from a professional stance, from an educator stance. And again, this is, again, just a basic diagnostic that even I use to support whether or not I bring this into my learning activities. Can the student ultimately explain and defend the generated work? I'm going to tell you about a young man in a history class that I had last semester. Young man comes in and he explains to everyone that he would like to write his term paper on the civil rights movement. And of course, this was a very rich conversation that we had amongst the class. And of course, we brought in the GPT and we started to have questions in reference to this. So this young man submits that he wants to write about the civil rights movement. And as the historian comes out, main question is, well, would you think that writing about the civil rights movement is a rather broad objective? And of course he says, well, no, I just want to write, this is what I want to write about. And I said, well, okay. So let's look at it in this sense right here. Let's pull up our GPT that's been built for you. Okay, and it's built and designed with our LAIR framework. And I want you to ask this one question. Prompt it with saying, hey, I'm supposed to write a term paper. I would like to write about the civil rights movement, and let's see what the feedback is going to be. And of course, the first string of feedback is, hey, that's a pretty broad objective to write about the civil rights movement. And so I have this young man right there, live, right there in front of the class, and said, what's our next step? Our next step is to try to narrow it down a little bit. Of course, he's prompted to say, hey, you might want to narrow down, this thought process, and you might want to narrow down what you want to write about. So as he narrows it down, he starts to get to a time frame. He gets to a time frame. He gets to a topic. He gets to a person that he would like to write about. So he's got a person. He's got a time frame. He's got something small, manageable, something that he can actually write about. The questions now become, as we're following along this diagnostic, does it preserve student thinking rather than substituting it? So he finally got to a point where he wanted to write about Dr. Martin Luther King and his speech right here in Memphis, Tennessee, his very last speech. And as he gets to this, he's in this GPT, he pulls in, and he gets to the Library of Congress, and he gets to see the speech. It's right there at the Library of Congress. So now we have our source work. Now we've got primary sources available. Now we've got something to where the learning really comes to life. And he looks at me and says, Dr. Meador, I'm going to write about this. I'm going to write it on this speech right here. I said, fair enough. He says, but I don't understand what Dr. King was saying. I said, have you considered asking the GPT to put it in 2025 terms? And so this young man right here, as we're living and breathing, this young man takes it and he says, okay, well, let's try it. And he asked for it to put it in 2025 speak. And the life that came from this young man as he was looking at it, he was like, man, I know exactly what he was saying. It took the Library of Congress and it took that paper and it put it into something that these early 20-somethings can actually understand. And as he's reading through it, he's wanting to go a little more, and he's wanting to go deeper into it. He's wanting to go so deep into it that I've actually had to cut him off to say, hey, we can't go too far here because, last semester I had close to 250 students at that semester. And so I was like, hey, that's a lot of reading I've got to do. And I want to make sure that we're, at least, maintaining, our process here. But those questions, like you see on that screen, does the planned AI use preserve student thinking rather than substituting it? In this particular case, it absolutely did not substitute anything. And this young man wanted to go even further. He also used it in a way that could ultimately explain and defend the generated work. He brought up his cell phone right in the smack in the middle of class and said, hey, I took a Library of Congress document and it completely unfolded it and unpacked it in a language that I could actually understand, make sense of, and can actually now speak to. I think that's where this embrace as a partner has actually gotten us to. Because it's in those moments that we actually, consider that authentic learning. It was authentic learning for me. The kid got an A on his paper. He really wrote it. Oh, and that same tool, by the way, that same tool, it also formatted an MLA style for him. That way, everything that he touched, he was seeing MLA. Because that's the common source formatting that we use at UT Martin. So he's reading MLA, he's seeing MLA, he can reference MLA. The notion is to write MLA at this point. So that leads us to this next one. That was the faculty diagnostic. We just really unfolded the student diagnostic right there in the last example. Ensuring ownership of your learning. I give this to my students in their AI usage. I have an AI usage policy that's posted to my Canvas course shell, to my Google Classrooms, to any institutional platform that I've hosted a pilot at. These student diagnostics are readily available. That visual thought process, visual thinking has come to life. That way they have access to it. First question, moving from left to right. Am I using AI to think better or to avoid thinking entirely? You're going to see a response from one of us, and I giggle about it because it is pretty funny. How candid some of my students are with, no, I just used it to hurry up and get through the assignment, or I used it to clarify something and I just kept on going. But if they can answer number one, then they can proceed to question number two. What parts of this output did you do independently, or did you independently verify? Like for the young man last semester that did the history paper, he was independently verifying the speech by Dr. King. He was independently verifying the speech by Dr. King that was at the library, housed at the Library of Congress. All reputable, a very reputable source, and widely used across the United States and the world for that matter. Leads to the next question. Do I understand this output well enough to orally defend it to my professor? But I think that last question is what remains my responsibility. And there's your answer. All of it. Maintaining and the maintenance of ethical and academic accountability. With my history assignments, again, I've had to modify even how I teach and how I operate in my classroom. And that modification is to say, you use AI, be prepared to tell me how you use it. That's now incorporated into their papers as well. When I do my papers, the expectation is for them to be able to own how they operated with artificial intelligence. Well, I may have started with my book, but I went to ChatGPT, had it summarize my book, and here's what chapter 1 has to say. Those are the types of conversations that we're currently having, and they're getting richer and deeper on a daily basis. Again, it's back to that LAIR framework. What can AI do and what can it not do, how I can apply it into my class, what that interpretation looks like. But last but not least, you see it right here on the screen, what remains my responsibility. So that's that student diagnostic. It's a very, very important piece, and we start off with that at the start of the semester. We start that with every class. I'm hoping that you guys picked up a pattern right here on the screen, and that pattern is, in fact, this is not about a tool. This is that structured thinking. So how do I bring all this to the classroom? Through this right here, practical structural shifts. All right. There is a requirement for a prompting process. All right, and now I'm about to move into a demo, and for the next 20 minutes, we'll be in a live demo session. Of course, we'll leave off with some Q&A. All right, so let's do this. And let me pull you up. All right. A GPT. You use Google Gym, you use Claude, you use Grok, same process. Let's notice something. Not signed in, free version. I'm gonna have this tell me about the causes of the American Revolution. It's going to compute. And of course, I didn't put any guardrails on limitation of size or the scope of text. All right. So it's going to give me a host of information. Would everybody agree that that looks pretty good? Okay. Seems good. It's giving me information. But again, that left column is it's summarizing things. Now, as a student, I could just simply take this and sure, I could cut, copy, and paste it. It's even giving me some links in here. All right. It's giving me some links. These things are now going to go over a little bit. Of course, this is just the free version. Go in. I could dig a little deeper, if you will. Would anybody here have a problem with this? And if you had a problem, why would you have a problem with it?
I have a problem because I use it enough to know that when it's listed like that, it's probably generated by a chat box.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say too, because I use this so much, I know that it said causes, but I'm also like curious as to why. Like I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, yeah, I see that's the cause, but why? Because usually the question is not just what happened, but what caused this to happen or what were some of the factors. I just have a lot of questions, but that's also because I use it a lot.
But you guys are spot on though. That's the whole thing. Now think of it through the lens. I mean, you guys are involved with ICL and education and things of that nature. Think of it now through the lens of a historian. As a historian, I'm sitting over here looking, and I'm looking at these dates, and first things comes in. Okay, well, are the dates in order, or is this something that's linear? I see links that are over here. I'm going to have to test every one of these links. I see no source work in here at all. where can I go further for more information? Oh, it's got the times in here. Go to a newspaper. This is really, really problematic for me. And so, at this point, I'm critically evaluating the products here, right? But that's just the prompt. I don't know why my camera's doing that, I apologize. Tell me the causes of the American Revolution. Now, what if we shifted that? What if we as professors, what if we changed how we did our activities or how we approached our activities, and we now got into something that is a little more interesting. All right. Okay, so I'm going to give it some context here. I'm telling it what I need to do. I'm writing about the American Revolution. I need two primary sources. I need a table of content or a table of causes, and I'll also need to have sources in MLA format. Now, just sheer blanket information there. Hypothetical, just giving you some example. We're putting context into this. So, writing about the American Revolution, need two primary sources, need a table of causes, need to have sources in MLA format. I need you to talk to me as a war correspondent and in the tone of a Continental soldier. We're getting a little deeper. We're having a little fun with it. So now it starts to bridge some of this stuff out. This is only skin deep here. All right. Now, for the sake of time, now I'm looking at, okay, so they cited the Declaration of Independence, or they pulled the Declaration of Independence as a primary source, and they also used Common Sense by Thomas Paine as a primary source. Both significant documents, particularly Thomas Paine, as well as the Declaration of Independence, but really, really Common Sense. Let's see. So as I'm looking at this, okay, and of course it gives me the prompt. All right, so we've got that. Now, I'm going to take this. I'm going to copy that. Now, let's use something that's been trained. And it's been trained on a literacy framework, the LAIR framework. Same principle. Write about the American Revolution. Need two primary sources, need a table of causes. I need to have, sources in the MLA format. Of course, here's how you need to talk to me and the tone in which you need to do it. How this has been trained, again, it's trained to respond, one, on the LAIR framework, but two, with our depths of knowledge. So any response, it's going to demonstrate the literacy, it'll demonstrate application, interpretation, or any of those degrees. Again, it's based off of that. So let's see what we've got here. There's our table of contents. The sources are already in the text itself, as you can see right here. So it's provided the source work there. The amount of detail is significantly richer. Again, it's trained on application. So not only does it give a source, but it also tells how they might use it in their paper. So it's getting into that responsibility aspect of things. Now they are the center, again, of that human governance. Hey, I can use this, and now this opens up the thought process to say, I can really use this in my paper. Here's how it might fit. It gives the demonstration of that MLA format. Again, a significant difference from what we saw with just the regular version of it. And of course, last but not least, it actually prompts a paragraph for potential use. And of course, it's got the citation that's in there. And each and every one of these are linkable. So this is something that's trained. And of course, that's where we're getting into now, what's trained and what's untrained. And of course, you're going to see a host of frameworks that come out, and that's all, that's going to be, good and bad, because everything's going to have to be tested. All right. Now, I'm going to demonstrate something. I want to show you. Let's pull back over here. So everything that you've just seen, I ask my students the same question. Let's see. I asked them specifically, when they use, stand by 1 minute, I apologize, this thing went down on me. Okay. This is a real world pilot that's going on. The student was asked to use a regular GPT with the prompt. The student wrote about slope because they were having difficulty in mathematics. They used the prompt inside of, like I said, the regular GPT, and then they turned around and they used the prompt in a LAIR trained GPT. And the student themselves call out the difference in between the two. Of course, I had to sanitize some information. This pilot's been going on since the middle of March. Of course, they're currently in state testing right now, so we had to kind of draw down a little bit. That way they could focus on state testing. But we'll end up picking up and finishing out this particular pilot before should be May the 9th. But this is an 8th grader's feedback. And they can tell the difference. There's your delta. So they are using GPT. But this type of feedback is really helpful on the modification and the changes that I've got to make to ensure that they're actually understanding and getting it. All right, so let's do this, and we will exit out of that. And we are about to wrap this up. All right, so integrity is by design, not just simple detection, okay? And again, you'll have access to this in the one-pager that I've sent out, so you guys can look at that. Again, authentic, if we're looking at authentic thinking as our roof, most conversations about AI in education actually are starting in the wrong place. It's not about the tool. They're starting in detection, if you will, okay? Detecting. But detection is reactive, if you think about it. Our stance now is we're all in a situation to where we can be very, very proactive about this, and what type of approach that's going to. So it assumes the problem has already happened, if you will, if we're looking at detection as reaction. This work in and of itself is different. I know everybody wants to know how it's different. Well, it's different because it's design. The same design that I learned right there at the university getting a PhD in instructional design and technology. The same design, okay, that lifted that systems thinking off the ground for the betterment of somebody else's learning experience. So if you're looking at this structure right here, one of the things that I'd like for you to call out or to really focus on is pillar one, and that's the better assignment design. Alignment of the learning goals. Reducing vulnerability. If assessment doesn't require thinking, we can't expect thinking. I'll say that again. If assessment or the assignment assignment, excuse me. If assignment doesn't require thinking, then we shouldn't expect it. That next pillar is the visible student reasoning process, evidence, reflection, attribution, all those wonderful terms that make those learning experiences, really beat our drum, if you will, okay? Make student thinking visible. Evidence, reflection, explanation. We don't lose integrity because of AI. We lose it we actually lose it when thinking is invisible. That's why I've used the term visible thinking so frequently in today's workshop. And last but not least is that accountability for process. Accountability could be oral defense, discussion, grading what's below the surface. Students are not just responsible for what they submit, they also are responsible for how they got there. And that's a new plug on how we evaluate rigor and things of that nature. When you look at that foundation, we all have a foundation. That's the very bottom piece there. Clear expectations and consistent faculty judgment. It's not just structural, it's cultural when all of this is in place. We don't have to worry as much about AI misusage when, again, all of this is in place. And last but not least, folks, AI is a permanent fixture in higher education. It is here. It's no longer whether, faculty will deal with it. The question is really up now, whether we will respond with clarity, structure, and of course, academic purpose. I think we have that opportunity. I know we have that opportunity because I'm living it myself. And there is one thing that, I'd like to convey is that, I do belong to the system of education where we are taking the old and blending that with the new. And that is the permanent shift. And that's what's so powerful about all this. Are there any questions? I want to make sure we leave at least, I tried to give you 15, 20 minutes of stuff, but I also wanted to ensure that, with as powerful as this stuff is, hey, look, AI is not lowering the bar. It's not lowering the bar. It's actually forcing us to define what the bar is. And it's through that exposure that we're really seeing some good things. And I've got nothing but hopes and aspirations. So, and I hope you got a little something out of this.
Thank you so much, Matt, for sharing. I'm going to open up the floor for questions, but while people may be thinking, I have questions about the diagrams you have created.
Yeah.
One, they're beautiful, but did you create them? Are they accessible? I don't know. I think they spoke very visually to what's going on.
Yes. Yeah. So I can share these. These are I created the foundation. I created all the bridges, and then of course I used Canva. Canva is amazing when it comes to the design aspect of things, and then of course I let Canva do its thing. But all the phrases, the terms, things of that nature, that has come from the LAIR process. Again, I started the Learning AI Institute as I started this journey, and of course, that is where we've picked up, and that's where things have gotten to fruition. But you can thank all the niceness. I don't want to say the prettiness, but the niceness of it is definitely Canva. So thank you, Canva.
Well, thank you for your ideas on that. Does anyone else have any questions? And if you have any in the chat, there is one in the chat. Do you have any physical resources you could share or recommend to assist faculty in teaching responsible AI use?
So I tell you what. By no means. Okay, so let me tell you what. Let me do something real quick. Okay. So this is a live pilot that I'm currently using. Let me do this real quick. And here is an option. Okay. Now I've sent something like this. So first and foremost, textbooks, me and textbooks, I will never put a student in a situation to where they have to, judge whether or not they're going to pay for a tank of gas on trying to get there and spending money on a textbook. I'm also well aware that with textbooks, if I was to write a 500-page textbook right now, it would probably, take upwards of 2 years. And of course, we would have to go through the rigmarole of, of validating it, assessing it, and it's a whole host of things. So time is something that we really don't have a lot of when it comes to making sure that processes are in place. So what I did was, instead of writing a 500-page textbook, I ended up breaking down and I wrote a 50-page manual called AI Literacy for Students. And so AI Literacy for Students goes through about 8 modules, and in those 8 modules, it is 50 pages of how to use artificial intelligence based on that LAIR framework. Again, everything that I touch is based on LAIR. There's not a thing that's out there that is representing me that is not touched through that framework. And it is for that reason why it has been so powerful. If you would like a copy of that, I could certainly give you a copy. I know that I've shared it with Dr. Tawfik, and Logan, I think I've given you a copy of a digital format. But the students that I work with even have access to this, those materials as well. Let's do this. So just to kind of give you an example, let's let this load up. And it's almost 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Internet might be slowing down on my end. So at any rate, the book itself, the 50 pages, or the manual that has been written, again, it's broken down granularly in between different nodes in the module. Again, that's a basic way. Anything else that I have come across to answer your question succinctly has been based on the tools themselves. There is nothing that I have come across to date that physically shows me how to do this. That is why this is so important, and why I'm doing these types of classes, even for you guys, is to demonstrate that, these are all really lived experiences right now. I have not come across a thing. The University of Central Florida has their STAR program, and that STAR program is an active repository of content areas and context areas and lesson plans. It's called STAR. I've got a couple of things that are published there for our history column, and it's lesson plans that have been designed, lesson activities, things of that nature. So I hope that helps out. Wasn't trying to get all elaborate there, but to answer your question, there's nothing that I've come across. And 2, I've had to develop everything that I've ever used. And the LAIR framework is trademarked. I am dead serious about this. It is my goal to train people on LAIR, and LAIR be a systems level approach to how AI is used in education across the board, institutions, school districts. That's how important this is to me. So hope that helps out a little bit. I know I'm a little long-winded. Let me see if I can pull this book up. Gee whiz. Okay. If I pull up classwork, you're going to see names. Yeah, unfortunately, it won't pop up. But like I said, I know that Logan, I've sent over the AI literacy for students. So Logan, if you'd like to share that, or if you need another copy of it, I can send it over to you digitally.
Yeah, if you'll send it to me digitally, I just looked and I have pictures. I'm not sure, or I'm missing where I have the
That's fine.
digital link. So if you'll
That's
just
fine.
send it and I can pass it on. Make sure you read the chat, Dr. Meador. There's nice comments in there. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Thank you guys very much for your feedback. I do have a survey if you guys don't mind filling that out. I can share that with you. Please, like I said, anything that I need to change. I will say this, I've got 3 minutes. I want to make sure I capitalize. So let me show you something, if you don't mind. And, just bear with me one moment. All right, let's do this. I'm a numbers guy. So let me show you some numbers. So in December, if you don't know what platform this is IXL. In December, a failing school reached out and they asked if I could help their students get back on the right track. And I'm always up for the challenge, no matter what it is. When it comes to learning, this is my profession, and this is it's got to be done. So since December, these students have been involved with IXL, and this is the amount of questions that they've answered. I chose this particular graphic because I wanted you guys to see something. We reward and we measure our learning off of activity, time, amount spent. Again, folks, this is since December. They've spent 1,022 hours. 89 students, 82 of those students are in English Language Arts, 8th grade. And this is how active they've been. They've answered over 108,000 questions, 276 questions. You can see how many skills that they've practiced. Well, when I communicate with district personnel and I tell them what this is, they can see for themselves what it is. But they're not drawing on that real power behind it. So I can take these types of screenshots and now I can insert this because there's no student data in there other than sheer number. But I can take those screenshots and I can plug that into a GPT and I can say, tell me what this really means. And it will tell me, oh, Doc, you've got 3,952 questions or skills that were practiced. Of that, 2,616 were actually mastered. That means that out of every skill practiced, 66% of your population is mastering it. And that is what executive leadership is looking for. And that's how we really use this. And so it's not just us getting the answers. It's drawing out that next level of information and hitting that grand slam. Because if a district was to determine whether or not they're going to use iReady or IXL, this is the sheer platform in which they're going to do it. Now that number's actually gone up to 110,000, even with TCAP going on. But I wanted to share that because that's how powerful this tool is. And we are in a situation now where measuring time on task, learning activity, those are